Hey everybody, welcome back. My name is Steve with Tri-State Overland, and this is my lovely wife Melinda. And
Hi.
we wanted to talk about our recent trip to Moab that we planned and went on. And a couple of people have asked, actually quite a few people have asked, how did you plan for this? What did you do? What steps did you take? I've been thinking about doing a trip like this or a longer trip, and I have no idea where to begin. So we thought it would be a good idea to kind of go over the process that we used or that we came up with. We kind of narrowed it down to five areas, or a couple areas. One, the vehicles. We want to talk about the vehicles that came. What requirements did we have, or maybe suggestions do we have for the vehicles? I want to talk about route planning, which was a big one. Most of us came from Pennsylvania, New York, Ohio, West Virginia, the other side of the country. We had to drive all the way across, it was about 2,000 miles away. So the route was extremely important to plan the most efficient, way to get there. We want to talk about the lodging, both along the way and when we got there. Where were we going to stay? What campgrounds or BLM sites? Were there hotels involved? And lastly, we want to talk about budget. How did we prepare everyone for how much this was going to cost? So I just wanted to kind of take a few minutes with her and kind of, go over how we planned this. What steps did we follow to lay this all out for a large group of people to drive across the country from the East Coast to the West Coast and make this trip happen and tell you about all the fun we had.
We're going to spend today talking about how we planned it and how we got out there and sort of the factors that went into everything prior to actually arriving in Moab. And then we're going to break it up a little bit more and talk about what kind of gear we brought and why we brought it, how we liked using it or wouldn't bring it again, that kind of stuff. And probably send a whole section on just the meals because we love to cook at camp.
Yeah.
So for a lot of us that ended up going on this trip, and we put it out to our tri-state group to see who would be interested. But part of that is this was the first time that many of us were taking the rigs across the country, and we knew we were targeting Moab, and we knew we wanted to do some of the more technical trails that might be out there, along with some of the scenic stuff. So we wanted to set some ground rules on how many people would take this trek with us, and then some basics that their rigs should be capable of doing going on this trip. So as far as the limit, we set it at 12. We ended up with 7, but 12 we thought was a good place to start.
Yeah.
And then from a rig capability perspective, we didn't care what you drove, whether that be a Jeep or a Tacoma or a 4Runner or a Lexus or whatever it was. But we did think there should be some minimum clearance. So the
Minimum
tires
clearance requirements.
Minimum
Not
clearance
minimum
requirements.
clearance. Minimum clearance is tiny. You don't want that.
No. They needed to.
Much
Yes,
clearance.
they needed to have a lot of clearance.
Right.
And we needed to have someone.
Do you want
within
to
the
redo
group.
that?
No, that's
Okay.
fine. We needed to have someone with recovery gear. Not everybody needed to have a winch or recovery straps, but at least several of us should have that. Really beyond the clearance and recovery gear, I don't know that anything else was out there for required. You had to be self-sustaining to an extent. We were still in the planning stages of how the lodging and camping and so forth was going to work.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody did need to be able to sleep out of their vehicle, whether that was a rooftop tent, they towed a camper, or they had a ground tent that they were going to set up. It didn't really matter. Some people, a hammock, they could sleep in their vehicle, but they needed to have something to overland with, frankly, to wherever we stopped that they could potentially set up for the night. Those were really the big things that we talked about. Maybe a little bit about food, but we'll get into food in a whole other section.
With the rigs, like she mentioned, recovery gear, not everybody had to have everything. We had, I think, 3 or 4 vehicles that had winches, which, thankfully we didn't have to use any recovery gear on the trip. Yeah. Nobody had any issues. It was fantastic. But we wanted to make sure we at least had a handful of winches available. Almost everybody had tow straps, flat tire kits, patches, sidewall repair kits, all kind of stuff. You never know what you're going to, run into. And for me, I wasn't so much worried about having a flat tire in Utah. It was having a flat tire in Kansas halfway across the country and then no way to fix it. So, we brought all the
burnout.
we bought all the tools. I had an issue with my clutch on the way home in Denver. I almost didn't make it out of Denver. That was kind of rough. So I have a new clutch coming. But yeah, there were a lot of things that we weren't sure about, being that it was our first time planning any trip this big or this long. And if you're going on a trip this long, I guess my advice to anybody would be understand and know your rig. Know where your weak points are. I don't care if you have a Toyota or a Ford or a Jeep. Every vehicle has a weak point. And be prepared. Try and, bring a few extra tie rod ends if you need them, or stabilizer links or whatever. Downtown Moab is a home to a few nice parts stores. And when we talked to the couple parts stores there, they said, don't worry, we have plenty of parts for every major vehicle that comes down here.
So now that we figured out who's going to go on this trip with us, and we needed to plan and where we were going to go, right? We needed to figure out how we were going to get there. Because while we're in the Midwest, we had we're in Ohio, people in other parts of Ohio, other Pennsylvania, New York, and everybody had different requirements from when they were able to get out of work, and some were driving further, all that. So we had to think about strategically where we were going to meet to start this trek. And then from there, we also wanted to be conscious, right? We had many different rigs with different fuel economy requirements, fuel tank size. Yeah. Everyone was conscientious at the time that we were planning this. Gas prices were spiking here and all across the country.
Right.
Really, there's two main routes that you could take from the East Coast over to Moab. One is via Route 70, which is called the Southern Route. The other one is via Route 80, which is called the Northern Route. And for us, it became very clear that at least heading out there, the Southern Route was going to be the way to go, based on the geography of where some of our parties were coming from, and our decision to meet for the first night in Indianapolis.
So we decided to, we were coming from all different areas over here. We wanted a central point to meet at. So we actually broke the drive out there into 4 days. Getting burnt out while driving is a bad thing. You become tired, you become lazy, you tend to drift off a little, not drift off as far as sleep, but kind of your mind wanders, and it's the monotony of driving nonstop for 8, 9, 10, 12 hours. It's
particularly through the middle of the country where it's a bit
it sucks. You don't want to do that usually. So if you have to power through it, you can. So we met in Indianapolis, and we stayed our first night as a group in a hotel, and it was beautiful. We ate at a restaurant called the Flamme Burger. It was like the Flame Burger, but French-ish, I guess. The food was outstanding, like the best fried zucchini I've ever had. The burger was fantastic. The atmosphere was great. We hung out too. We broke the route planning up into sections, so we knew that we had our least fuel efficient vehicle we used as the baseline for this planning, and so we knew that vehicle was a Jeep Wrangler on 37-inch tires that was towing a camper, and he was going to get the worst fuel economy out of anybody in the group. So we based everything off of that one vehicle. Now, that vehicle could go about 240 to 260 miles between stops. Now, every one of us had extra gas. We had Rotopegs, we had jerry cans, we had all kinds of stuff. We had plenty of fuel. Now, driving across the Midwest, for those that are kind of nervous about that, don't be. If you stay on the main route, stay on Route 70, you won't be without gas. There are plenty of places to stop. There's plenty of desolate places where you could just watch your dog, as my friend says, run away for 2 weeks. But you don't go very long between stops. So
and actually, the same is true of the Northern Route. We didn't know that till we came home.
We came back,
because we came home that route. But while it is a boring drive, there are enough stops with enough frequency that worry that we had going into it turned out not to really be
being that it was our first time doing anything across the country like that, we were kind of nervous about fuel and whether we would run out or not. Totally fine. Don't panic about that. Don't try and overplan for it. The rule that we stuck with as a group when we were driving out there is if you're in between a quarter and a half anywhere in that little range and you come up to somewhere you can get gas, stop and top off. Even if you don't need it, if you top off a quarter tank, just do it. Top it off. Know that you always have enough fuel and you'll be fine. So the route, we broke it up into increments based on 240 miles. Every 240 miles, this is where we'd stop for gas or stop to camp. And it ended up being that we went from Indianapolis to a KOA in Topeka, Kansas, the first night on Friday. And so we set up camp there. It was a beautiful camp. They kind of put us in a field in the back of the campground on a lake, and it was really just a beautiful sight. Really liked it. And then from Topeka, Kansas, we trekked up across the rest of the country and went into Denver.
Denver. I mean, you paused in Denver to pick me up.
I had to pick her up. She flew into Denver because of the kids. We couldn't get a sitter for the whole time. So she flew into Denver the first half of the ride out there.
But then
everybody else
was in Wolcott.
Yeah, they went to Wolcott, Colorado, where they had a beautiful, absolutely stunning BLM campsite. And I really liked that there. It was a little bit colder, but and we drove into that campsite when it was pitch black. So we couldn't see anything. So I will tell you right now, Wolcott Campground, fantastic. It was beautiful. We woke up not knowing what we're going to wake up to. We had, the mountainside, a beautiful, I think it was the Eagle River. Woke up to a local gentleman fly fishing for rainbow trout. It was awesome. It was just a really, really good environment. So from there, it was 2 hours past Denver, which was kind of nice because it was a little bit more driving that second day on the road, but it got us that much closer to Moab. So from there on Sunday, we were going to go from Wolcott, Colorado, and buzz down to Moab and have the whole afternoon to do stuff and explore and get settled in and check it out. And that got derailed pretty quickly when a semi overturned and blocked Route 70. It was like a 4-hour delay. So we had to go up and around the mountain, and it was a beautiful detour, but it added like 3.5 hours to the ride. So we didn't get into Moab until like 6 o'clock that night.
At this point, the driving, even the highway driving, changes dramatically as you're coming across the country, and it's flat and it's plains, and you are going up a steady incline the entire way. You don't necessarily feel it, but your truck will. And then once you hit Denver and the terrain changes and it becomes mountain driving, it is far different.
Yeah, I was really surprised. So you go from about 600-700 feet elevation to 6,000 feet pretty quick as you approach Denver. But I was really surprised when you get out of Kansas into Colorado, it still looks like Kansas. It looks like Kansas until you get just outside of Denver, and then you see the mountains, and then you start going up.
Front range.
And then it becomes like, wow, this is what Colorado is supposed to look like. But like the first half of Colorado doesn't look anything like what you would, if you've never been there.
Yeah.
I didn't look anything like I thought I was going to. So
the next part of our planning process that we wanted to talk about is lodging. And actually, lodging may not be quite the right term. It's a little bit more like camping, mostly.
Yeah,
however, for this particular trip, we weren't sure, and there were several wives that were coming along on the trip, and not everyone had, like shower setups and toilet setups and that sort of thing. So we took a couple different approaches, right?
Yeah.
So first was lodging sort of along our path where we were generally driving a lot of highway. And I think, as Steve mentioned earlier, the first stop in Indianapolis where everybody sort of met up before we started caravanning out, we did stay in a hotel. After
that, though, we stayed off grid for damn near the whole time.
But I think from a planning perspective, we started with, like, our first campground was a KOA in Kansas. I think you also mentioned that. And then we had our first experience with a BLM campground in Wolcott, also on the way out, which was wonderful. The challenge for us coming from the Midwest was that Bureau of Land Management type sites are not
They don't
common.
Exist here.
Yeah, I mean, you have some state parks and that sort of stuff,
right,
but it's not that dispersed camping, which is really what we were angling for. But also, again, as I mentioned, because we had a wide variety of people, including several women, and not everybody's setups had all the amenities that one might want. We had done some research to have like a home base campground in Moab that everybody could go as a meeting point. Everybody definitely had a campsite and that sort of thing. And then we had planned to have one night in Arches National Park as well. And all of our planning from a campground perspective, other than the KOA in Kansas, which you did love, completely backfired.
It all backfired.
We stayed at ACT, which if you are looking for all of the amenities, you are looking for RV camping or really RV camping, camper camping, then that's a good campground for that.
Yeah, it's not
bad. I mean, if that's you don't want to do the dispersed camping, it's a good. It was okay.
It was nice to have that as a guaranteed place to have a almost working, somewhat hot shower. The campground, the men's showers were not great. I mean, the head fell off while we were using it, and it just poured water. The other one sprayed into 2 other stalls, and it was the showers need work at ACT. It was a pretty decent little campground. The first night, first of all, the one thing you need to know about out west,
that's what I was going to say.
They don't understand what a rooftop tent is. Everything they consider dispersed camping is
when you called campgrounds.
When you called campgrounds, you put a backpack on with a tent in it, and then you hiked into your spot and then camped. And that's not what we wanted to do. We have everything built into the truck. So we wanted to open the rooftop tent and enjoy camping.
Not in a gravel parking lot.
And all that they had they had beautiful tent sites, but you had to walk down the stairs, and they were like 10 by 10 pads, which were really nice. However, you couldn't get a vehicle down there, so we couldn't use a rooftop tent. So we had to put the tents up in a gravel parking lot. Like, that was the first night. Now, having said that, we have never used BLM camp. We've never camped off-grid before, really. We've not done a lot of this, so we weren't sure what to expect.
We also didn't know about, like, the reservation system, right? And would we...
Yeah.
You can't do it ahead of time. It's first come, first serve. And we had no idea, like, how many,
right.
how easy it would be. And we wanted to make sure we had some place. And so our first rodeo, that's what we chose.
Yeah.
Going forward, if you are the type of overlander and you want that stable campsite, try the KOA next time.
Yeah. It was not a bad camp. They had some nice amenities there. Like the RV site or the camper sites up top were better. They were a lot bigger. The one thing I didn't like is it was real close to the highway, but that's going to happen sometimes. No big deal. But they did have working toilets and showers, and they had a nice kitchen area. It wasn't all bad. It was a little disappointing at first, but we made it work. The second night, though, we said forget it, and we played it by ear, and then we went to.
Well, the second day we did Fins and Things.
Yeah, we did Fins and Things,
which was in the Sand Flats Recreation area, and
just getting a site there.
Going in, we're like, camp. What are all these campsites? And one of the gentlemen that was in our group, who's like, yeah, it's like $5 a night, and you just find the next open one,
and you set up,
and we're like. Why didn't we do this?
Well, we didn't know. And a lot of people going out for the first time may not realize that you could do that. And
correct.
The site we ended up finding for a few nights was right along the Fins and Things trail.
Yeah,
and
awesome.
It was, I'll put videos behind me. It was absolutely amazing. It was a beautiful site. It was perfect. Yeah. There was nothing I would have changed about it. We had like 5 or 6 people at the site. Great. I mean, right on the edge of the mountain. It was awesome.
And I don't know about the different seasons and time of year. I mean, we were in the fall, so from an availability perspective and like tourist crowds and that sort of thing, it was a bit died down. So we really didn't have any trouble those first couple nights. In Sand Flats, there were dozens of sites that were available, and we were a little picky. We wanted to go a little further into the park, and we wanted to have a group of 5 or 6 sites sort of in the same little turnaround cul-de-sac type area. But if you were by yourself or just a couple of guys, it would have been super easy to find a spot.
It was really, really nice.
We did learn that lesson. We stayed there a few nights.
Yep.
And then the
last night we found a spot on 128.
The last night we wanted to stay on the Colorado River. Yeah. And so right outside Arches National Park on Highway 128 along the Colorado River, there's probably 7 or so small. I mean, there's maybe 5 to 10 spots in each campground,
probably.
Roughly. Maybe a couple were a little bit bigger, but we literally were driving in every single one, drive up and down, see if there's, if they're reserved or not, and then driving back out to the next one.
Yeah.
And it was like the second to last one where we found a site. And fortunately, that time, we were just looking for us.
Yeah.
So we were able to do it. But
to kind of
lesson
circle
learned.
back on the lodging, camping, staying, whatever. Don't be afraid to go out and just find a BLM site. There's hundreds of sites out there. There's even just spots like land that you can just pull off into the distance and set up camp. We
They do
saw
have
a
a
ton of
website
that.
to give you some guidance too. If you're unfamiliar with it, check out their website so you can learn where. I mean, we were focused on Moab, but
Yeah, I guess the one major takeaway is don't be intimidated by BLM camping or camping off grid. It's really abundant out there. There's a lot of places to go, and it's very easy. You pull into the site as long as you check the little card and no one's reserved that site. You reserve it. You put your money in the envelope in the little drop box, and then stick it on the peg out, right outside the site, and that's yours for as many nights as you reserve it. They range from $5 a night to $20 a night out in Moab, and we will not be using a campground again when we go out there.
I think it's worth noting too. Most of those campground sites, like we were talking about along 128, had a restroom. Didn't have running water, but there was a couple might have had running water, but there is a restroom.
Yeah, they're little outhouses, and they're actually fairly clean for what. So that brings us to our last topic I want to talk about, and that's budget. How do you budget for a trip like this? What do you have to plan? What do you have to know about driving across the country and staying in random campsites and all that stuff? So you got to plan fuel. That's the biggest one, obviously. And right now, with gas prices going up and down and, all that, you have to plan that. And the best advice I can give is kind of what I did was I over budgeted. So I looked at what gas was, and at the time, I believe it was March or April, we were looking at fuel prices across the country. So we planned the route, and if you go on Google Maps, you can actually see the fuel prices in the area. So as I said before, 250 miles or so, we would see what city we were by, and then I would look at, how much the gas is there. So if it was $3.75, we kind of just took a good survey, and it was about $4.50 a gallon average. So I priced the trip out at $6 a gallon because I didn't really think it was going to get over $6 a gallon. I didn't think we were going to get way under that, but it gave everybody a good baseline of, we're going to travel 1,900 miles, and if you get this many miles per tank, the math worked out to about 15 miles to the gallon on average, and about 15 or 16 gallon tank average in the group. Yeah. So that equated to about $250 in fuel a day roughly on the way out. So we budgeted that plus, and that was we told everyone, set aside $1,500 for gas. We're going to be driving out there. We're going to be stopping, and, that's round trip, about $750 on the way out, $750 on the way back. We over budgeted for it, so we had that money planned for fuel, and that was a worst case scenario, $6 average, and I think the most we paid was maybe $4.79 out in Utah. It was as soon as we crossed the border from Colorado to Utah, gas went up $1 a gallon. It was instantly $1 more. So over budget your fuel costs just to be on the safe side, just to make sure you have it. The other thing,
the big thing was lodging.
Which
we overdid that too by doing the campground. If you do the BLM land, like we were saying, it far cheaper.
Way cheaper.
And honestly,
a third of the
better
price.
Experience. So
and a lot better experience. And then food, just by now, everyone considering a trip like this should kind of have some idea of how they want to eat on the trail. You can get by eating hamburgers, hot dogs, and cereal.
Or if you're a mountain house person, we're not, but you could do that too.
One of our guys, Dominic, he just eats the macaroni and cheese and Oreos, and that's all he brings, really. So, pretty cheap to eat that way. We brought, things that we prepared a lot of it at home. So, like, we cut up a lot of vegetables at home. So we like to eat a lot of vegetables, and we cut up chicken and prepared that for fajitas. We had the fajita mix. We cut up peppers and broccoli and cauliflower, and we had hot dogs, and we had a lot of different things. But we set our vehicle up so that we have the 42 quart fridge on one side in the back seat, and then in the middle we have a 42 quart, roughly, I think it's a 50 quart cooler. So we have all the drinks, like, milk, orange juice, pop water, all that stuff in the cooler with ice. You just change out at about every couple, 3-4 days. We have an Igloo BMX cooler, and it really, for a cheap cooler, it was like $100. It does really awesome with holding the ice and keeping it cold. And then the refrigerator has everything else, and that was great.
I love our refrigerator.
Yeah, so budgeting for things like that, if you don't have a refrigerator, know that you don't have to break the bank. I'm actually going to link the one that we use. We've had it for a little over 2 years now. We've used it probably 15, 20 times on trips, and it's for a $300 refrigerator, it's absolutely game-changing.
Absolutely.
So budgeting is just over budget, over plan, and be pleasantly surprised when you have a couple $100 left over, when you get home from the trip and you go, oh, that wasn't as bad as I thought. For 10 to 12 days on the road, experiencing, everything Utah had to offer.
It was awesome.
It was a very affordable vacation. So I would highly recommend it. If you're thinking about going, absolutely budget for it and absolutely try and go. Well worth it. And, leave any comments down below in the comment section and we'll answer. If you like the video, leave us a like, subscribe, and leave some comments below and let us know what you think.